I could hear their cries at night, echoing through the thin walls as the metal shackles rattled against the bed frames. The sound was unbearable, but worse still was knowing that there was nothing I could do to stop it. We weren't allowed outside, we weren't allowed to talk to anyone, not even each other most of the time. Our days were spent in silence, broken only by the occasional sharp command from our parents. Mark and Sarah controlled every aspect of our lives: when we could eat, if we were fed at all, when we could sleep, and even when we were allowed to use the bathroom. I can't remember the last time I bathed. Filth clung to every inch of my skin, my hair matted and unwashed for months, but it didn't matter. None of it mattered because there was no escape. That's what I told myself every day. There was no way out, not for me, not for my siblings. But something changed the night before. My youngest sister, Sky, who was just 5, had been chained for days without food. I could hear her weak sobs through the walls, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart ached, knowing she was suffering, knowing that there was nothing I could do, but then a thought crept into my mind, something I had never dared to consider before. Maybe I could do something. Maybe I could be the one to free us. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sky's face, pale and gaunt, her small wrists bound by cold metal chains. I couldn't bear it anymore. The fear that had held me in place for years was still there, but now something stronger was taking its place: desperation. The next morning, I made my decision. I knew where my parents kept the old phone, an ancient flip phone that no longer worked for calls, but maybe, just maybe, it could connect to emergency services. I had never used a phone before. I wasn't even sure if I could figure out how, but I had to try. If I didn't, I knew Sky wouldn't survive much longer. As soon as I heard my parents leave the house for their usual errands, I made my move. My heart was pounding in my chest, so loud I was afraid it might give me away. I slipped into the room where they kept the phone, my hands trembling as I picked it up. For a moment, I just stared at it, unsure of what to do next, but then I remembered the stories I had overheard from our neighbors when they didn't know I was listening. Stories of kids who called for help. I wasn't sure if it would work, but I knew I had to try. With shaky hands, I opened the window in my room and climbed out. The cold air hit me like a slap to the face. I had never been outside alone before, and the world seemed so big, so vast, that it nearly swallowed me whole. But I couldn't focus on that. I had to make the call. I dialed 911. My fingers trembled as I held the phone to my ear, waiting for the ringing to stop. When the voice on the other end answered, I nearly dropped the phone in shock. 911, what's your emergency? My voice came out in a whisper. Please, I need help. My siblings, my sisters are chained up. Please help us. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking me for details, where I was, what had happened. But I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know where we lived. I didn't know the address or the name of the street. I had never been allowed to leave the house. Panic started to set in, my chest tightening as I realized I might not be able to save us after all. I don't know where we are. Tears welling up in my eyes. I've never been outside before. Please, you have to find us. I was sure they would hang up, that they would think I was just some confused kid, but the dispatcher's voice stayed steady, soothing almost. They asked me to describe anything I could see outside the window, a landmark, a building, anything that might help them locate us. I looked around, my eyes scanning the unfamiliar landscape, and then I saw it, a small park at the end of the street with a playground I had only ever seen through the cracks in the curtains. There's a park, I whispered. I see a park. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, that help was on the way, but every second that passed felt like an eternity. I was afraid my parents would come home before the police arrived, that they would find me with the phone and lock me up for good. I waited, frozen in place, my heart racing as I stared at the street, praying for the flashing lights of a police car, and then I heard it, the sound of sirens in the distance. My breath caught in my throat as the noise grew louder, closer, until finally I saw the blue and red lights reflecting off the windows of the house. The police had arrived. They didn't waste any time. They burst through the door, guns drawn, their voices loud and authoritative as they commanded everyone to stay down. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, watching as they stormed through the house, breaking open the doors to the rooms where my siblings were kept. I'll never forget the moment they found Sky. She was curled up in a corner, her wrists still bound by chains, her eyes wide with fear. But when she saw the officers, she didn't cry, she just stared as if she couldn't believe